Hey everybody, and welcome to my top 10 board games that are rated poorly on Board Game Geek. Now, to be honest, I'm not normally one of those people who put a lot of stock or investment into Board Game Geek rankings or ratings. However, as a general rule, and over the years, I've come to learn that any games that are rated 6.5 or below on Board Game Geek normally turn out to be pretty bad. Now, that is personal experience. However, all these games on this list are an exception to that rule, and I think these games range from being decent to pretty damn excellent. But before I get into my top 10, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, keyender.co.uk, where you can get a bunch of great games with some great loyalty schemes and discounts. So I highly encourage you to check out their great website and use my link below to get 5% off your first order. But without further ado, let's get started with the list. At number 10, I have Mammoth, which is a simple family weight set collection game, but I think this one should be rated higher than the 6.3 that it is rated, simply because of how unique it is. So the way this game works, at least in terms of the scoring, is as you'd probably expect with a lot of set collection games, where you want to have, the most of these types of symbols, or these types of symbols are worth, X amount of points each, or don't have the least of these symbols. They're very simple stuff. However, the way that you collect these different icons and symbols is extremely interesting, as at the start of the game, or the round, you're going to have a bunch of these different tokens in the centre of the table, and on your turn, you can take as many of those tokens as you like into in front of you to claim them as your own. And then it will go to the next player, who can do the same. They can either take from the middle, any denomination they want, or they can take all the collections from another player and move it in front of them minus one token, and they'll put that spare token back into the centre of the table. So what will happen eventually is that everybody will kind of be satisfied by exchanging and removing one, putting it back into the middle. They'll be satisfied to the point where you're happy with your little hoard, and then the points will be divided out. You'll play that out of a certain number of rounds, and then the winner will be the person with the most victory points. That is pretty much the extent of Mammoth, but as I said, I've never seen that kind of greedy mechanism be used before. So yeah, lots of things to consider here. A bit of mental maths that you need to balance out, thinking, is he gaining more than me? Am I doing the best here? I don't want to fall behind on this. So it's actually a game that keeps you on the edge of your seat. You need to really be on the ball and see what other people are doing to keep up with other players and some of the scoring criteria. And you know what? It's a pretty damn fun game that you can get played in 30 to 45 minutes. And to be honest, the few playings I've had of this one, I've really enjoyed. At number 9, I have Robber Knights, or Expedition Luxor, depending on which version you have. And this is an abstract tile placement and kind of area control style game designed by Rudiger Dorn. And this game actually uses the same mechanism that Rudiger Dorn is most known for through his games Istanbul or Genoa. And this one, you are essentially laying these tiles out every single round, and then every now and then you will spawn these castles. And these castles will let you claim or take a bunch of your discs in a tower. And then, just like in Istanbul, you are moving from disc or from tile to tile, depositing discs as you go and spreading out. And basically, you're trying to control these regions by the end of the game. However, as the game develops, people can start overlapping your discs with their own to basically nullify your power in those regions. The different terrain types require different types or a different amount of discs to go on them. So it's a very abstract, very blocky style game. But there is some pretty interesting decisions here. How are you going to pace yourself? You don't want to commit too early because you're leaving yourself vulnerable to be covered up by the other players. And again, you want to lay out the board to suit you. You can put these kind of mountains down to block other people as well, or make them waste a bunch of discs to get into your areas. It's actually a very clever game. And as I said, I think if you enjoy abstracts, I think there's a lot here that deserves your attention, just to cast your eye over it, because there is some pretty cutthroat, but some pretty interesting concepts here. Very simple rule set, but it works for me, and definitely think it deserves more than the 6.1 rating that it has on Board Game Geek. At number 8, I have Sunken City by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. And this is certainly one of Kramer and Kiesling's forgotten designs. It's certainly been lost to the annals of time. This is going back 20 years or so ago when this one was released. But this is a unique game, as you are trying to basically use your player piece to run around all these different kind of sunken cities, and then collect the treasure from those cities and get back to your base to deposit them. And it's basically a race to get all the different types of treasure from these huge chunky building blocks that you're putting on the board as you go. However, the twist on this game is that every round there's a Neptune token that's a neutral player piece that's going to run around on these different pathways and sync the pathways that you've already laid. And if you have any treasure on you at that time when you're sunk, then you're going to lose all the treasure you captured. So it's a kind of a push your luck game. You're going to run and get a bunch of stuff and get back to your base safely. You want to manipulate it so Neptune's not near you and it's going towards your opponents. And you know what? It's a lot of silly fun. And I really enjoyed my time with this one. Again, it's very simple the way it works, but there's some pretty clever card play in it as well, because you have a fixed bunch of cards in your hand with different movement types on them. And again, you need to use those accordingly. You know, are you going to move this amount of spaces, or are you going to save that higher movement card for later? And you know what? It's a really dynamic style game. It does feel very different to anything else out there. I'm not going to say that it's a perfect game, because it's not. Sometimes it can be quite frustrating because you've got a whole bunch of treasure, but then someone sinks you. But at the end of the day, that's probably your fault for being a bit greedy and trying to get things done too quickly. But a lot of fun to be had with Sunken City, and I think it deserves more than the 6.2 rating it has on Board Game Geek. At number 7, I have Flea Market by Sid Saxon. This is actually the lowest rated game on this list, with a pretty poor rating of 5.5 out of 10. But I actually think this game is really clever, and it's grown on me a lot since the time I've had this one in my own collection. So this is a simple bidding style game. However, you have no control over your bids whatsoever. You're going to have a bunch of these items ranging from 3 all the way up to 18, which corresponds to the cumulative value of 3 dice being rolled. Then all you're going to do is you're going to roll those 3 dice. The item corresponding to that dice roll is going to come up for auction, and all people are going to roll 2 dice of their own colour, and that's going to determine the bids that you can use to buy the item that's come up for sale. However, the people who've rolled the highest value, or the player who's rolled the highest, is going to have first refusal on that item, but are going to have to pay the value that they've rolled. So again, higher rolls are good because they give you first priority to buy things, but it costs you more money. And if it's refused, it'll go down to the next player, and so on. The reason you want to collect these items is because if these numbers are ever rolled again, then you will get a fixed sum of money. And as the game goes on, that money is going to increase. So the kind of more commonly rolled numbers are a lot more valuable because they're going to get rolled more and more often, but they're going to be more expensive to do so. And if they come up for resale again, then people can actually buy them off you, but give them money to you to for them to obtain it. So a really clever little back and forth game, and very luck dependent, but there is some good swings here that are actually really enjoyable. And it's a nice quick 20-minute game that is a lot of fun. And I really encourage you to give this game a bit of attention. And if you like really, talking featherweight games, then this one is right up there for me. So that is Flea Market. At number 6, I have Celtus by Rainer Knizia, which is rated a 6.4 out of 10. So Celtus is actually the board game version of one of Knizia's most famous and most revered games, Lost Cities. However, Lost Cities is a strictly 2-player game. This one can play up to 4 players. And to be honest, the DNA of these games is almost identical. You're doing the same thing, trying to build these runs of cards in different colours. But in this one, instead of trying to, tot up your numbered amounts to score points, this one you're trying to climb these different tracks associated to a different deck of cards. And as you climb these tracks, you're going to start acquiring more and more points, and you can even get these little chain reaction bonuses where if you climb this track, it will let you climb this track, which will let you climb this track, and you can take some pretty clever and satisfying turns. So that's pretty much the extent of the game. It's just managing your hand. It can be frustrating at times as you're playing things in order. You take a gap in that order, and then all of a sudden you draw the card that you needed to get you kind of more life out of that tower. But still, a lot of fun to be had here. It plays in about half an hour, 45 minutes. If you like Lost Cities, but you feel constrained by the 2-player count, then this is certainly one for you to at least pay some attention to, because it is a lot of fun to be had. It's well designed. There's 2 variations to the board. You can play the simple mode, or you can play the more advanced mode. And you know what? I've enjoyed every single game I've had of Celtus. I think it's a lot of fun, and it should be rated more highly. At number 5, I have the most recent game on this list. This is Splitter. So Splitter is actually a roll and write style game, and I will have to say this is actually one of my favourite roll and write style games. It's a very simple one, and it kind of is a bit of a throwback to when roll and write games were a bit more pure, a bit easier to understand, but I still think the decisions in this game are really interesting, and the concept itself is a lot of fun. So essentially you're going to have this sheet, you're going to roll a pair of dice, and on this pair of dice, obviously you're going to have 2 numbers. When you place one number, you have to place the opposite number on like a mirrored image on the other side of your sheet. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create these different clusters of numbers depending on the pip value. So you want the 1 pip values on their own, you want 2s in pairs, you want 3s in triples, you want 4s, a group of 4 together, and so on. And as you do that, you're going to get more and more points. You've got these double bonuses as well if you get a completed set on the double marker. And it's such a little restrictive puzzle that you need to map out. You need to sometimes just roll with the punches and do the best with a bad roll. And you know what? I've enjoyed every single game of this one as well. You're talking about a 15-minute game. It costs less than £10 to buy. Very portable. You can teach this one to anybody, and it's an absolute blast to play. And it's been a consistent hit since I've had this one in my collection. And hopefully this is going to be more widely distributed, because I think some people are having trouble getting their hands on it. And I'm really surprised to see this is only rated a 6.4 on Board Game Geek, because I thought this would be at least a 7, because it is that accessible and that much fun. So that is Splitter. Definitely a recommendation from me if you enjoy your roll and write style games. At number 4, I have Crosswords, which is rated a 6.5 out of 10. Now, out of all the games on this list, this is probably one I can understand why people might not like it. And not because the game, or anything wrong with the game at all, but it just might not be people's tastes. So Crosswords is a word association style game, as you have a bunch of these clues basically on the vertical and horizontal axes. And where these cross over, you need to give a clue that kind of correctly associates to both of those clues. So it might be something like, maybe an animal on one axis, and on the other one is like a superhero. So on that you might want to put like Black Panther or something, because again it's a superhero and an animal, and so on. So you can be very creative in the clues that you give with this. Sometimes the corresponding axes are very difficult for you to think of things, but sometimes you just pull it out the drawer in your mind and you'll come out with an absolutely blinding answer. And so yeah, it gives you lots of room to be creative. And I just think this is a lovely experience and a great party game that you can play in 5 minutes. So it's literally set the game up, set a timer for 5 minutes, and you've got that much time to get all your clues down. A lot of fun. Again, if you like playing with words, you like kind of, associating words together and tagging one word with another one, then this is an absolute blast to play. One of my favourite party games. I think it's criminally underrated and a hell of a lot of fun. So that is Crosswords at number 4. At number 3, I have strictly a 2-player game with Ka-Ching, which actually goes all the way back to the year 2001. So we're talking over 20 years old when this game was released. However, I still think this game holds up remarkably well, and it almost feels like an evergreen because of how simple and pure it is, because of the pure tension the game offers, and just the complete streamlined beauty of it. So this is a kind of a mathematical game as you're trying to get as much money as you can, and you're going to do that by drafting cards from these 5 columns of 7 cards. So these cards are only going to have a colour associated to them and also a number. And all you're going to do on your turn is you're going to do one of 2 things. You're going to draft a card and add it to your hand and pay for it, or you are going to combine a pair of matching coloured cards and multiply the scores with one another, or the number on them. So if I draft a 3, I draft a 6, and then I spend my turn to combine them together, then I'm going to get 18 money back in return, which will allow me to buy more cards and stuff going forward. A very tight game, one you have to be very conscious of the opportunities you're leaving your opponent. And honestly, I really can't find fault with this one. I think this is an excellent 2-player game, and I think maybe it's been lost to the annals of time, but I think this one deserves a reprint. It deserves to be in more people's collection, and if only more people knew about it. So highly, highly encourage you check out Ka-Ching, and this is criminally rated at 6.4. I cannot even understand that. Great game, and yeah, highly recommend it. At number 2, I have El Caballero, which is actually another Wolfgang Kramer game. However, this time it is not a co-design with Michael Kiesling. It is actually with Richard Ulrich, who just so happens to be the co-designer of the great El Grande, which just so happens to be my favourite game of all time. And I think that might be one of the key reasons why this one isn't rated so highly, is because it lives in the shadow of the great El Grande. However, they are very different styles of games. One is, a pure area majority game. This one is more of a tile placement style game with some area control in it as well. As you're placing tiles onto the board, these tiles are going to have a kind of a sea mass on them, or a land mass. And you are also donating these player tiles onto the board of your colour, which you can actually manipulate as the game goes on. And all these different tiles can have different numbers on each kind of edge on them, and you can increase them as you go to combat back and forth for control of these regions. There's some additional rules you can add in as well to ramp up the complexity, and I have to say this is probably one of my favourite tile placement games out there. It's in my collection and I enjoy it a lot. I think maybe another reason why this one isn't rated so highly is because some of the rules are a little bit ambiguous, not because they're not clear, but because it doesn't give you a definitive set of rules to how to play the game optimally. It kind of says things like, if you want to play this amount of rounds, then you can do. If you want to play with this rule, then you can do. I'd rather have a concrete set of rules recommended by a great designer like Wolfgang Kramer to say, this is how you play the best version of El Caballero. But I think once you find your groove with this one, you are really going to enjoy it, and criminally underrated. And this is up there with the best tile placement games, and I adore it. So that is El Caballero at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Verbunk. So out of all these games, this is the one that I absolutely cannot find any reason as to why it is rated as low as it is. Only 6.4 out of 10. That to me is baffling. This is a fantastic, almost like a party plus bluffing style game as you're trying to get as much money as you can. And you're going to start this game with a bunch of these different tables in a big ring. You're going to have your own player piece on it, and all you do on this game is you start distributing money out onto these tables, and then you play these cards in player order secretly. They're either going to be to claim the money from one of these tables, to trap another player who goes to that table. So if someone lands on that table, they've taken the money, you trap them, then you're going to get all the money from them that they would have taken. Or you've got a pure bluffing card that does nothing. And that's all this game does. I love the pacing of this one, as I think in the first round you put a little bit of money down, the second round you put a bit more, the third round you put a bit more. You've got bluffing, you've got double bluffing, the trapping mechanism is great, the way the player order works is great. Honestly, as far as high player count games go, that you don't want a silly social deduction game or anything like that, this is pretty much as good as it gets. If I have 5 or 6 players, this is almost a banker every single time. What a brilliant Las Vegas feeling style game. And honestly, I couldn't recommend this one enough. If you like interactive, high stakes, high energy style gameplay, then Verbunk is fantastic and criminally underrated if people are putting this at a 6.4 out of 10. Again, I cannot even understand why that is. So there we go, those are my top 10 games that are rated poorly on Board Game Geek. Hopefully there's something up here that has caught your attention, something that you weren't so aware of, probably because it is ranked so low. However, I do stand behind these games. I think they're all really good, rating to pretty damn excellent at the top end of that list. So again, hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. Additionally, if you want to go that extra step, then I do have a Patreon campaign, which I'd obviously love you to join in, and be sure to check out the show sponsor, keyendar.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer in the UK. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye now.